Hola everybody, welcome back to NRW. I'm your host today, Rob Medina, and I thank you very much for joining me here today because today I've got a very special review here for you because this is actually the very first time where I've had a director reach out to me personally and had asked, hey, would you be interested in checking out my movie and then possibly review the film? I actually felt very honored that they've even gone out of the way to ask me to share my thoughts on the movie. And the film that I'm reviewing here today is Cherokee Creek. I'm going to say this right now. This movie is a fucking gem. I love this movie, and I'm so glad that the director Todd Jenkins had asked me to check out his movie and then possibly review the film, because once I saw it I was like, man, I am gonna be fucking honored to review this movie here for you because this is a fucking masterpiece of a film. But this is going to be an acquired taste though, because this movie I know is not going to be for everybody, but the way I see it, this movie can be seen by anybody and can be enjoyed by everybody too. And I'll go into details as far as why. But the one thing I'm going to preface here too is that, as I mentioned before, this is going to be an acquired taste because this definitely falls into the horror 80s slasher genre with immature humor, because this movie does not hide as far as what it's going to deliver. There's going to be a lot of nudity. There's going to be some sex. There's going to be blood and guts. A lot of drugs, sex, and rock and roll. As I said sex before, but it has all those things, and they do not fail to deliver in any of those fronts at all. And they make no secret about what this movie is going to be all about. And by God, is it a fucking gorgeous movie. I think this movie is a fucking masterpiece because when you learn about what it took to make this film, it's a miracle that it turned out the way that it did. It's a very well done movie from start to finish. And again, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here because this movie deserves its flowers, man. As my good friend Patrick says here, Todd Jenkins, I'm giving you your flowers because this movie is a fucking masterpiece. I love this film. Now, I definitely will get into the plot, and of course, I'm going to get into my positives. And believe it or not, there actually is a negative about this movie that I'll be getting into as well. So let's get started with this. The story of Cherokee Creek is really, really simple. It deals with a group of friends who are throwing a bachelor party out in the middle of the woods. And the reason why they're doing that is because their friend that's going to get married is getting married to a very controlling woman. She tells this guy what to do, when to do, how to do it, and this guy listens to her every word. So they had lied to his fiance to tell her and convincing her that we're going to go camping out in the woods. We're not going to have any strippers out there because, one, no strippers would want to come out there in the first place. Secondly, we're in a public area, so we're not going to be drinking anyways. And, we're just going to be grilling, telling campfire stories, hanging out, go to sleep, and then come back home. So she agreed to that. But, of course, they had other plans, and they brought strippers. They have drugs and alcohol, some sex. There's some sex that occurs in there as well, too, and other forms of debauchery as well. And Bigfoot is also in that area, and one of the legends is that the very first sighting of Bigfoot that ever occurred was in that particular area in Cherokee Creek. So there are these rules that are in place from people that have survived the woods of what not to do in order for you to piss Bigfoot off, and so that way you can survive the night. And as a result of the legend of Bigfoot being out there, there's also reward for anyone that can bring him in and collect a reward of $1 million. So there was a lot of hunters that have come out there who try to capture Bigfoot, setting up traps and so on and so forth, and there have been a lot of death along the way too. So the local sheriff department had put signs out there to inform the public this is a restrictive area. You should not be trespassing, and if you do, there's a fine, and you can also end up in jail as well. So they're giving him all these incentives for the public to avoid going through these woods. But people don't listen, and a lot of deaths have occurred along the way. So you clearly see that happen in this movie. And this movie makes no secret about what it is. It is a very silly movie. It's a lot of immature humor. There's a lot of gore. There's body parts being ripped off. There's just all sorts of silliness in this movie that I don't mean to say it in a way that comes off negative, because it's not. It's silliness because it's enjoyable in my opinion. And there are a lot of people who die, a few people that survive, and Bigfoot comes out on top. That is the film in a nutshell right there. So from here on out, I'm going to get into my positives. And then, of course, I mentioned before, I do have one negative. The first positive for me has to do with how well this movie is put together. I mean, this movie is shot very, very well. There's a lot that should have gone against this movie, which there was. There was a lot of hurdles that Todd and everyone else involved had to go through in getting this film made. But when you look at the movie and how well it was shot, how crisp the sound is, and how good the quality of the music is, and how good the cinematography, the lighting is, it is just done so good. And considering when you find out how much it cost to make the film, and how how difficult it was to get everyone together at the same time to shoot all the very integral, important scenes, which took out most of the movie. It was a very, very difficult process. And when you find out that there was a period of 6 months in shooting the movie, in a lot of cases you had only once or twice, they are able to do these scenes once or twice a week. In some cases, for a span of maybe a week or two, or they couldn't do anything at all because not everyone was available. It was a very difficult thing for Todd and everyone else to get their schedule worked out for them to work together, mostly at night, which was very cold, and also at a time where no one wanted to work because it was the weather conditions were very, very harsh in certain situations, and some people were quitting because of the content of the movie, among many other things as well. It's amazing that how well this movie turned out, as I mentioned before, because when you look at the movie, you can't even tell of all the struggles they had to go through, because it is put together beautifully, in my opinion. This, to me, is a masterpiece of a film. And I'm not blowing smoke when I say that here, because when you learn how hard it was to make this movie and you see how well it turned out in the final product, you got to give everyone props, including Todd Jenkins, because Todd Jenkins is the fucking man. Having to go through what he had to go through, which was not an easy thing from what I'm hearing, you know what? That guy deserves his flowers. My next positive has to do with the characters in this movie. I love virtually every single character in this film. Every single one of these characters have done a really good job for me to be invested with the story, because every one of these characters have a uniqueness about them that's really, really funny. In some ways kind of disturbing in a lot of ways, but in a funny way, I should say. But the biggest problem that I have with the horror genre, especially the slasher, is that the characters are the weakest things about the movie. And I can honestly say that this is not the case at all with this film. There's a lot of times you get to spend with the characters. I mean, you spend some really quality time with them. You learn about their background a little bit, and there's some insight that you learn about them, and then someone else gives you additional insight about the characters' flaws, if you will, that you learn about, that you realize, holy shit, now I understand the bigger picture. Now it's starting to make more sense to me, because you have the time to spend with these characters to learn about that with them. And then everything that's set up with these characters they're not there just to be a body bag, if you will. They actually serve a purpose in telling the story and having the proper setups for the next set of events to occur as the film continues. And that's what I really appreciate about this movie, because there are a lot of little details that I have picked up on this movie because I've seen this movie over like 5 times at this point. But there are those details that I found to be very, very important, where there's a setup and it leads into the next set of events that will occur, that you tend to forget what's going on as things keep getting like more and more crazier, and then you can come back and revisit something that was talked about before or was seen before, and all of a sudden, holy shit, I forgot about all that. Now it makes more sense, and the way that the story pays off at the end is a really satisfying one, in my opinion. This movie, I think, excels when it comes to the characters, because again, in the horror genre, that's usually that's the weakest part of the movie. It's the characters. But in this case, that is not the case at all. This movie, I think, has done a really good job in allowing the actors to do their thing. Because one thing about Todd that he had mentioned before is that he allowed the actors to improvise, so long as they stick with the guidelines of the story and the guidelines of the characters, but improvising and allowing them to be able to try something different, to add a little more elements to the characters and add more flair to the story, if you will. And you can see that it works beautifully. And when you watch it, there's a very authenticity about these characters that come out by having these actors use these moments to improvise certain lines and reactions or whatever the case may be. And it looks very real in this particular case. Yes, it's a little silly, of course, because this is the type of film that it's meant to be. It's supposed to be a silly horror genre slasher film, but they've done it so effectively, in my opinion, that it far exceeds better in most other horror movies that are meant to be straightforward narrative with a real terror behind that don't excel very well in this silly little movie. And I mean that in the most loving way, I should say. But this little movie is able to have that impact for you to feel for these characters and understand where they're coming from, because you have the time to spend with them to learn about them. And this movie is almost 2 hours long, and that was actually one of my big surprises about the movie, that it was 2 hours long, and I was concerned it was going to be a dragged out story. But to my surprise, this movie flew by very, very quickly. And I've got to give props to Todd and everyone else involved in allowing the characters to tell their story and develop and learn about them. And yeah, I can go on and on about that, because that was actually my favorite part about the whole movie, is that the characters are fucking fantastic in this film. Now, when it comes to the violence, the sex, and the nudity I meant to say in this film, I loved it. I thought that was actually some of the best parts in the film. And coming from a straight man, some of the best scenes in this movie have to do with dicks. And without really ruining it for anybody who's never seen the film, I'm going to say this here. It's rather impressive that a detached dick can still keep its erection. Something about that I found to be very impressive, and I also found to be fucking hilarious too. There are a lot of comedic beats in this film that I just was not expecting, that I just kept going further and further and further. And it never really felt like it was being dragged on. In fact, there was a really good payoff for that, because everything that's being set up with this movie serves a purpose. And then when you have that payoff, you had the time to develop that and to get to that punchline, if you will. And as far as the sex scenes are concerned in this movie, and as far as the nudities are concerned, it never felt out of place. And what I mean by that is this. So they could have taken the approach of making it more erotic for guys who are really into that sort of stuff. But instead, they actually kept true to its tone of the film, which is a funny movie. It's a hilarious horror slasher film, and they're not going to change tones for the sex scenes. They kept the comedy elements consistent throughout those scenes, and they worked very effectively, in my opinion. They were actually some of the funniest scenes in the movie, too. So Todd and everyone else that's involved in putting this film together have done a really good job, and in my opinion, creating this masterpiece. It may sound like I'm blowing smoke, but I'm not. I really do think this movie is a fucking masterpiece, especially for this genre, because considering what you've heard of what it took to make this film, this movie should have never worked, but it fucking did, and I think it's a fucking hilarious movie, a really, really good film. I can go on and on about what it is about that I love about this film, but I feel like the more I get into it, the more I'm going to be getting to that spoiler territory, because there are some character beats and some twists and turns that come along the way that came to a surprise for me that I thought worked very effectively. So I'm hoping that you guys will go out of your way to check it out, and hope you guys get the same reaction. But there is one other thing I want to get into here too, and that has to do with my negative. Believe it or not, the negative that I have with this movie really has to do with Bigfoot. Now, I'm not saying that Bigfoot was not good in this movie. He is good in the film. He's not in the movie that much, believe it or not. Todd definitely is taking that Jaws approach and showing less is more, if you will. And I think in that regard, it was effective. The only thing I really wish we got more of when it came to Bigfoot is that when he's in the movie, and again, I understand that maybe it has to do with budget and time, and I get all that. So this is not throwing shade at anybody in making the film. But for my own personal taste, I really wish we've gotten more of him. And when we got more of him, we actually got to see the grotesque aspect of what he could actually do, and as far as like ripping body parts apart, and many other things when it comes to the violence. Because believe it or not, the violence, although it is over the top, it's really not that bad. In comparison, there are some other films that are far worse when it comes to violence, and this movie in some areas is kind of tame when it comes to that, with the exception of like the dicks and tits that are being ripped off. But aside from that, it's pretty standard fare for the most part. And in that regard, I feel like that's where I think the film was at its weakest. I'm not saying it sucked because of that. It's not the case at all. It's just that I really would have liked to see a little bit more of Bigfoot and see him being much more integral to the storyline. But again, this movie's more focused, I meant to say, on the characters, and I think that worked very effectively for us to connect with them and seeing their story, seeing their development. And Bigfoot's just a backdrop. But honestly, I would have liked to see him a little bit more in the movie. That's really my only main negative with the film. Of course, this is not a perfect movie. I'm not saying this is the most perfect film in the world. It isn't. But this is a fun, and I mean, this is a great movie to watch with friends in a large environment, like in a theater or with a group of friends in a living room on a big screen TV. I mean, this is a film that's meant to be to watch under those circumstances, and I think you guys will get a lot of enjoyment factor out of that. So from here on out, let's get into my rating. If you haven't figured it out by now, I love this movie. I mean, I love this film. I love this movie with a fucking passion. I think this movie is a fucking masterpiece. Is it a perfect film? No. But it's a fun movie. I think this movie is meant to be just entertaining. Just have fun with it. You don't have to be a fan of the slasher horror genre. I don't think you need to be a fan of that genre for you to enjoy this movie. You can watch this movie with a group of friends in a theater or at home on a big screen TV, and I think you're going to have a great time with this movie, because there are going to be a lot of things that you're going to walk away being shocked from and being probably horrified from what you're seeing, and you're still going to have a good time with it, because The movie's fun. It's hilarious. And this is a movie that I think deserves to be watched in a large environment with a crowd of people who just want to have a good time. This movie certainly offers that. And you can tell that Todd and everyone else involved just wanted to make a fun movie, that they're paying homage to the films before that came out that had certainly inspired them to make this movie, but adding their own flavor to it, adding their own twist to it, and making it a very unique film within this oversaturated genre. So I think they've done a really good job in accomplishing that and hitting all the check marks, and then also providing something new in this genre with this wonderful film in Cherokee Creek. So if you haven't figured it out by now, I love this movie. So for me, I give this film a solid cheers. I'll also make sure to have the links in the description down below where you can rent the movie on Amazon for 99 cents. You could also buy it there digitally too for $4.99 if I'm not mistaken. And you could also buy the movie down there too. I will have the link for you guys to click on to buy it on Blu-ray for $19.99. This is a movie that I really do believe deserves that investment. You really should go out of your way to support this movie and buying it, renting it. Really, that's really what your vote does count. And I also do believe this movie deserves the same attention in the same vein as like The Room, Samurai Cop, The Thing, what else? Trick or Treat, Troll 2, many other films of that nature, because this movie is meant to be seen by a large audience. And I think in seeing that in that environment really does help with your enjoyment factor of this film and really having a good time with it, watching with the crowd, because this movie deserves that attention and really deserves a whole lot more as well too. So I hope you guys go out of your way to support the film. But if you have seen the movie, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And also, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel. Also share and like our videos, and also hit that notification bell down there. And follow us on our social media accounts. We have a Facebook and Instagram page at New Release Wednesdays, and on Twitter at the NRW. And follow me on my social media accounts on Instagram, Rob_Medina0585, on Twitter, RobMedina0585, and on Facebook, simply just Rob Medina. And if you haven't heard already, I have a show here on the NRW called You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and also follow the show's social media accounts as well. We have an Instagram page at You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and on Twitter, You're So Cool with WRM. And also, my guest this week on the show is none other than the director of Cherokee Creek, Todd Jenkins. And I am not blowing smoke when I say this here. I really do believe that Todd Jenkins is a very, very good director, considering the circumstances he was dealt with in making Cherokee Creek, and for it to turn out as well as it did in his final product. I remember at one point I was thinking to myself, if given the opportunity where he had money, time, and all the resources he needs available to make a movie, in whatever genre that may be, whether it be action, horror, romantic comedy, drama, whatever the case may be, I think this guy will excel and then some. So I really hope that opportunity does come to fruition for him, where he's able to show his skills to the world in a much bigger scale here, because I think, Todd, you deserve that. So cheers to you, bro. And that's pretty much it for me, guys, today. I hope you guys you enjoyed this review. And until next time, everybody, you guys stay safe out there, and cheers.